Welcome to the Pick Me Up Podcast Unscripted, brought to you by CDI College, the training you need for the career you want. I'm Jennifer Lee, and join me for a monthly conversation where we unravel the myths of mental health with our expert guests. Get ready for a fun and informative deep dive into many topics that are currently on our minds. Let's get started. Okay, so I'm really excited that we're on episode 3 of CDI College's Pick Me Up podcast. Today's episode, we're talking about the stigma around mental health because many years ago, people really weren't honest with how they were feeling. So now in the last few years, I would say we're getting better. We could be a lot better and more accepting. But we're getting there. I have that feeling. Especially in the last few months, we've seen professional athletes like Naomi Osaka say, hey, I'm not going to do the French Open. I'm not feeling up to it right now. My mental health comes first. Most recently at the Tokyo Olympics, of course, we've seen Simone Biles, and she has said, no, mental health comes first. So I'm glad we're finally seeing public figures step up to the plate and say enough is enough. And I hope we can do that in society, no matter what position that we hold. So we're going to talk to a mental health expert. He's a mental health counselor. His name is Sam Chung, and he is in Seattle, or I guess Bellevue, Washington. And really excited to talk to you about this topic because I have been watching the Olympics. Have you?
Yeah, I have been. It's been a kind of an interesting year, to say the least, with the Olympics.
You think being a year pushed already was like the headline, but now we're seeing a lot more interesting stories come out too. So we'll get to that in just a second. But before we start, kind of peeling back the layers of mental health, I want to know about you more. I know that you are also a pastor as well, which I think is really cool. So, how did you get to being a pastor and a mental health counselor? Tell us your story.
I just remember even at a young age that I had a lot of people or a lot of friends that would call me and have conversation with me about things. And I always tended to be someone that would listen to people and empathize with people with their struggles. And I think a big part of that was just the journey that I had of just growing up in an immigrant family, the challenges that come with that growing up in America. And so for me, it was a natural progression, I would say, in a lot of ways. And my story went through different paths of figuring out what I wanted to do. But I had the opportunity to be able to pursue being a pastor and being a mental health counselor. And so yeah, in kind of a nutshell, that's my story. Currently I am pastoring one of the pastors at a church here in Bellevue. It's a young church, and so there's a lot of young families there. And so I'm an associate pastor, and I have my own private practice. So I am a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Washington. I've been doing counseling for roughly 9 to 10 years. And the private practice has been a very unique season of mine for me personally, because I've been doing everything online. During the pandemic, there's just been such a wide range of issues that have come out due to the pandemic of COVID-19. And so this has opened the door to provide counseling to those that may not normally get it. And I would say it's just been going, we have a wait list. It's just been going off the roof in terms of just people wanting to get counseling and help. And so that has been the benefit of having counseling online, as opposed to meeting in person. And although many people would say prefer to meet in person, a lot of people that have tried online counseling have found it to be very beneficial and helpful. So it's kind of shifted even the stigma of that, of like online counseling, doing things virtually, as a positive and towards a positive direction, really allowing people to stay connected, but also to really get help around mental health issues.
So great. And it's unfortunate that something like COVID had to kind of push this forward, but I'm glad again that more and more people are admitting when they need to get help. That being said, because you're in this profession, and I know this is the topic and you're the expert and we look to you for guidance, but I know you guys are human beings too. So do you do anything in your off time to kind of keep a healthy lifestyle mentally and physically?
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is such an important question, because I think the assumption a lot of times is that we can just push forward and move on with life without having to care for ourselves. There are a lot of things that I try to implement in my life, whether it's spending time with family. I like to go on walks with my wife in the morning. My schedule allows me to do that. I try to go on walks in the evenings with my wife and my children and our dog. I spend as much time as I can with my family, just especially during this current season where a lot of things have been done at home. And so it's opened that door for me to spend more time with them. I also enjoy playing and listening to music. And so in my church, I do play guitar and I sing. And so music is a big part of my life. And it is a really helpful way of just receiving some type of self-care, right, when it comes to listening to music or playing music. And so there's an element of music really being a big part of my life when it comes to caring for myself. The other part is that I'm connected to different people in my life. So I have mentors. I'm part of like a men's group or a small group where we talk about real issues going on in our lives. And this is through my church. And so I think the benefits of that is accountability. It kind of puts everybody kind of on equal playing field when it comes to what we struggle with. And it allows us to really listen to one another and hear one another's stories. And so that's been part of my journey. And one thing I want to really emphasize just with this particular question is that practicing self-care is not selfish. And I want to make that very clear because I think in a lot of ways people assume that doing self-care or focusing on oneself is such a negative thing. But we have to remember that we are actually doing a favor to other people by taking care of ourselves. We are not at 100% functioning when we are not sleeping well, we're not eating right, we're not exercising. We have to remember that our physical bodies interact with our emotions. And so we have to remember that this is what will put us in the best position to be focused on what we need to do in our lives, but also to care for others better. So I think it's really important to clarify that because I think a lot of people assume that taking care of yourself is a selfish act. But I want to make it clear that when we care for ourselves, we actually can care for other people a lot better.
Or just learning to say no. I know that's something that I needed help with my counselor is the fact that, again, I felt being selfish because I was like, if I say no to people at certain times because maybe I'm not feeling 100% there mentally, I'm going to like, they're going to not be my friend anymore, or they're not going to want to hang out with me, or I'm not going to get invited. So I have that guilt of not wanting to say no, but sometimes you need it because I'm not gonna be a great person to be around if I don't have my time to kinda recharge.
Definitely, yeah, yeah. I think the aspect of even being able to say no is a reflection of putting around healthy boundaries as well in your life. And so I think that is an important aspect of taking care of yourself because we have to remember we are human beings. We have a certain capacity and nobody is self-sufficient at the end of the day. We all are required to live in a way where we need people and we need to eat, we need to sleep. I mean, we just can't do things 24/7. And so it's really important that we also create healthy boundaries around our lives so that we are not overdoing things or we're not overwhelming ourselves with things in our life.
Another thing that we're touching upon, which is overwhelming ourselves, and I know I'm guilty of this, is setting goals. Like, goals are great, but I think in society, especially with social media, and we see all these, like, great pictures of, like, our friends doing better in our lives for us, I put a lot of pressure on myself to hit certain goals by certain ages. Do you ever feel that type of pressure? And how do we kind of rewire our brains from that goal-orientated way of thinking? Like, I know it's important to have goals, but you kind of have to have a balance.
Yeah, 100%. I think one way is to really understand that for me personally, anything that was performance related, whether it's trying to do something, whether it's in school, getting good grades, or whether it's work, whatever work environment I'm in, anything performance related can lead to putting pressure on ourselves to be successful. And we have to remember that success is not necessarily manufactured within us. I would say that it is measured by our society and culture. And in a lot of ways, our society and culture is dictating what success looks like. And so when we feel like we don't live up to that, especially when we look at social media, we see the way that people look, what they have, money, success, all these things, and we don't live up to that, we feel like failures. But we have to remember that everyone is different. Everyone is different. Everyone is uniquely made, and everyone has a unique responsibility and part within this society. So the story of success looks very different from people to people. There isn't one form of success, if that makes sense. And so I think our culture and society may be pushing sometimes this agenda of what success looks like. But I really believe that you can be very successful in whatever sphere of influence that you are in. Because if you think about it, there are people that you will reach and people that you will connect with that nobody else will. And I think that is the unique thing about who we are as individuals in different spheres of our lives. And so I think success, we have to pull away from this idea of what society dictates as what it means to be successful. And we need to really think through, okay, how do I continue to measure what success looks like based off of what I've been given? And that is what makes you successful, is what you've been given, that you do that to the best of your ability. And so we have to remember, once again, success isn't just one form that we see. It's going to look different from person to person, because we're all very unique and different in how we've been built and made.
I think it's great that we're starting to see public figures too being like, that's not how you be successful. And they're like stepping up like the athletes, because it humanizes it. Because I'm like, okay, if Simone Biles is feeling this way, I'm feeling this way as well. Like it's normal. Like I look at her and I think she's an amazing young lady. And I look at Naomi Osaka, an amazing young lady as well. And I'm like, they have it all in my eyes, but they're human at the end of the day. And for them to put that clear boundary of like, I need to stop for my mental health, I think that is so amazing. And I know that there's been a lot of mixed reactions online, which we're going to get with social media. But for the most part, I think I've seen a pretty positive reaction to the most recent athletes that have said enough is enough. What are your thoughts on just public figures finally taking a stand against mental health and being like, this is a real issue that we need to solve now?
I think that with all that is happening right now, and the awareness that this is creating, I think that this is normalizing what people are dealing with. Um, this is the thing I feel like we see with athletes and celebrities and people in leadership. Our issue is that we assume that somehow these people are immune to being human beings. And this is something that you already mentioned, um, that you mentioned, Jennifer, but just this idea that, you know, these people are just somehow not human because of what they do. And we have these expectations on people that they don't, that on people that we don't even know or understand what they're dealing with. And every day, we walk by people, we interact with people, and we meet people in the grocery store, the bank teller, we go to Starbucks with the barista, and we make assumptions. And whenever we assume something, it could lead to a lack of empathy or understanding of what that person has gone through. One of the things that I really encourage people to do, when I do counseling or just in general, is to continue to be kind to people. That is a trait that I feel like we miss within our culture and society today, because of the way that we feel when someone wrongs us, or if we feel like someone is having a bad day, therefore there's something wrong with that person. But this is the interesting thing, is that we are not able to understand and dig through someone's life story based off of one interaction. Therefore, instead of assuming what someone is going through, or assuming that this person is just being a jerk or being mean, that we need to take a step back and empathize with them and understand, man, this person may be going through something that I have no idea about, and I just need to be kind to this person. And so I think in the same way with professional athletes, it's interesting how there's just so much criticism, right, towards athletes that are quote unquote not manning up or not performing a certain way, that they're letting people down. Um, I think we need to continue to humanize the issue and understand that people are just human beings. And Simone Biles has a reason for why she's doing what she's doing. And for us to sit there and tell her behind the computer screen or behind a TV screen that what she's doing is wrong, um, I think we're casting such judgment on people that we have no idea what they're dealing with. I would say the people that can speak into Simone's life are people that are close to her, that are connected to her. And these are the people that would understand what she's dealing with. But for people like us behind the scenes, I think we need to give people the benefit of the doubt. And that's something that we lack right now in our society. We don't give people the benefit of the doubt. And I think people like Simone Biles, Michael Phelps, Naomi Osaka, they are bringing to attention that, hey, like, I'm just a human being like you guys are. I have been gifted and talented in doing these specific things in my life, but that does not make me superhuman or not human at all. We need to remember that these are human beings that we are talking to.
I don't get why we are so invested as a society in these public pro athletes, because it's like they're not going to be sharing their wealth with me. So even if they win gold, like what is my benefit from them? So we could go into a huge topic around sporting culture and everything. Like, and I realize it's something that we've had around for like the whole time the earth has been around, and this idea of sports, but it's just, why are we so invested in these people winning?
I really feel like we as human beings want to live for something greater, and we vicariously live through people. And this is why I feel like we are so connected to sports teams. I live in Seattle, near Seattle, and sports is huge here. Obviously in the States it's huge. Obviously in Canada and Vancouver, you have the Canucks. And so I think there's an element of being so connected to these sports teams that we almost live vicariously through them. And we want to belong to something, whether it's a university team, whether it's a city, a state, province, or country. If a team wins, we feel like we win with them, right? Like we are so excited. On the flip side, when a team loses, you see people crying and being really emotional. And I think there's an element of living vicariously through people that leads us down this path that we are so invested in sports and just people's achievements. And so I think the unfortunate part of that is that when a team loses, we hear about bandwagon fans, right? People that just basically jump off the bandwagon. So success then is measured by just winning all the time. And unfortunately, um, I think not only sports teams feel that pressure, right? As you see athletes that get traded or, things like that, but you begin to see that there's a lot more pressure from the higher ups that want to create an atmosphere where it's just constantly about winning. And that is feeding into our culture and society today. It's just all about winning. And if you don't win, then you're a loser. And unfortunately, that is not a marker of success. And I want to be very clear about that, because even in sports, a lot of the greatest sports players in our lifetime, when you think of Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant and all these players, at the end of the day, they have lost many games, they have missed many shots, and they are not defined by that, meaning that that is what has driven them to grow more. And oftentimes our failures are what leads us to grow in a way where we can better, just develop as people. And so I would say in a lot of ways, we are just invested in these things because we want to vicariously live through people, and we want to be a part of something even greater than ourselves.
It's such a crazy thing to me, and I watched a really good documentary. Actually, it's a Michael Phelps documentary, and it's called The Weight of Gold, and it's focused on many different pro athletes, and I definitely recommend it to anybody because I just thought, wow, these people have it all because they're professional athletes, but really no, the struggles that they go through to get to each Olympics is something in itself. So I think we could learn a lot from the athletes, especially students as well, because students put huge amounts of pressure. Like I went to university, obviously you've gone to post-secondary education, and it is a stressful time. So how do students kind of start taking away that stigma around mental health? Do they start talking to each other more openly? What is some advice that you'd have for some students right now that are like, oh, I'm going back in the fall, and of course, a lot of them are going to be going back in person for the first time too. So that could be a little scary as well after we've been at home. We've got to get used to a whole new thing again.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things that students feeling that enormous pressure to be successful in school, I think one of the things is definitely being okay with knowing that this is a thread that we all carry. I think this idea of worrying or stress that we put on ourselves is a very human trait, and I think oftentimes because we don't normalize it, we think that something is wrong with us. And obviously, there are different measures to this, but I think for a student that is coming back to school, coming out of COVID-19, or maybe will be going back to school in person, whatever that looks like, I think initially there needs to be this understanding and this mindset that, hey, these things are normalized to a certain degree. Like it's not something that will hold me back, and I can really work through this. I can get help. Like I really, when I'm meeting with clients, especially those that are students, I always want to point them towards hope. And I also want to rationalize their thoughts, because I think oftentimes people will think about things. And when they have anxiety, it leads us down the path of the worst case scenario. You begin to think from the perspective, okay, as a student, if I fail this class, then I will fail my program, and then I will never get a job, and then I will one day be homeless. And so they go down this trajectory that is all going in their mind within the first 15 minutes of just me sitting with them. And we have to begin to rationalize those thoughts and understand, okay, what is really happening? How do you move forward with this in light of what you know? And how do you understand that sometimes your feelings can play tricks on you? I know we live in a culture right now that talks about how feelings matter and these are the most important things. But I also feel like sometimes our feelings can deceive us. Sometimes we can think something that is not there. Sometimes we can think that this is reality when it's not reality. And so, what we need to do is to understand what we feel, but that we have to respond differently in light of our feelings. And so, I think in a lot of ways, for a student, one of the things that they need to continue to do, or a student needs to do, is to erase that stigma, is to know that they are in good company, that there are other people that are dealing with this. The second thing that they need to do is to reach out to somebody. I think this is so important. And this can be even life and death for a student. And we want to do our best as mental health clinicians to care for those that are in need, but also for those to know that there is no shame in getting help or talking to somebody about it. All of us have gone through things in our lives. There's nobody that I know of that I've spoken to that hasn't been touched by something in their life that has impacted them in a negative way, whether it's trauma, whether it's brokenness, whether it's something that someone has done to them or something that they've done to somebody else. We all are in recovery of some of these things. And therefore, I really believe that that then puts everyone on equal playing field, knowing that nobody is different than the other person. We are all on the same page. We are all working toward recovery and working to grow in that way.
I think that's the thing. I know we've talked about it numerous times so far already through this interview, but it's just knowing that everybody is the same. And I think now we're realizing this with professionals or public figures coming out and talking to us. But before, I think we never realized that these people that we hold up on pedestals would ever have problems because they have money, they have power, they have everything that the regular Joe strives for. But we're all the same. We're all human. And I think that's the most powerful thing I'm learning. And like you said, we need to all come to that realization to be able to move forward as a society. And that being said, being a student or being in your career, I know we always hear this buzzword of work life balance, but in order to be successful, can you actually have a work life balance?
Yeah, I think so. I would hope so, because I would say that um, even for those that are successful, and maybe this is kind of the key indicator of it, um, when people are neglecting the things when it comes to that balance, it becomes to be very apparent. We see it in the way that people live. We see it in the way that it impacts their families or their other responsibilities. And I think once again, as we talked about what success is measured as and what success looks like, I really believe that um, taking care of your family and being a good citizen, in the country or the state that you're in, these are elements of what success can look like for people. I think those things can sometimes far outweigh just making a lot of money or being just high performance and all these things. So I think an element of that is to understand that um, whether that can be achieved or not, I think the bigger question is whether people are willing to do that. Because I think some people either are not willing to do it or don't know that it's impacting other people. And I think part of it is that self-reflection. I think we need to have a good perspective around these things. We need to recognize and take a step back from the things that we do. So say you are working and you're working really hard and you're working long hours and nights. It's so important that we begin to take a step back and really kind of assess our life and say, are there things that I'm neglecting in my life? Am I neglecting my own personal health? Am I neglecting the people that I care about and love? Am I neglecting things in my life? And to really take that moment to assess, okay, how do I create more balance in this? And I still believe that the most successful people will have these things in place. And maybe once again, with the Olympics, with Simone Biles and all these things that are coming out, maybe we're seeing more of this coming out now, because maybe this hasn't been placed as important in the beginning because there was pressure to perform a certain way. So now it's being kind of spilled over into the performance arena, in kind of a more of a public stage, which to me, as I mentioned, is a good thing. I feel like it creates more awareness. But I also believe that for Simone Biles or anybody else that has been struggling with these things, the continued work needs to be done when they go back home, when they are with their families, when they are, training, whatever that looks like. The main work needs to be done of assessing: am I creating balance in my life? Am I really taking care of myself?
I think people are forgetting right now because we're watching the Olympics and it's such in the moment thing. So we're seeing Simone Biles deal with this, but once the Olympics are over, she's got to go home and do the work, like you said. And we're not going to be there with her to do the work. And I think that's the one thing that my only worry about everyone coming out about their mental health is right now is like it's great for the awareness, but people don't realize that there's more work beyond the awareness. And I've done it, I've been there, and you think like it's one thing to be open with people about how you're feeling and that you are experiencing mental health symptoms, but it's the other thing to do all the steps to get you better.
Opening these doors to me really gives people the opportunity to start at a certain point. I think for Simone Biles, her coming out, and I agree with you, I think that she needs to then go back home and once again, I don't want to speculate or just make assumptions about her, but just anyone that's in a position like that, I would want them to have some type of plan of action afterwards. In the counseling world, we call it what we like to do is treatment plans, and so it means that we want to set goals and help people achieve these goals through these treatment plans. So it's a very it's laid out well so that you can see where you're going and how you're progressing. I think there needs to be proactive steps taking place, and there needs to be work that needs to be done, and that is the hard work that comes with really kind of stepping foot in that door, is that you have to begin to then put the work into it. It's not to add more pressure, but it's more for you to recognize and understand, okay, in order for me to grow in anything, I need to exert some type of effort into this. And if I'm going to put energy and time into my mental health, I need to do the things that will help me get better in my mental health. And so I think, you know, understanding that our society and our media and the way that they work in general, I would see that these things are being exposed and put out there. But at the same time, for the regular person, what I would want to tell them is that, hey, part of the acknowledgement then is to now move forward and really get genuine help. And I think the biggest questions people ask is like, what does that look like? Like, how do I get help and what do I do? And I think this is where it's important, where there are these things in place, whether it's within a college or a community or a church, that gives people an opportunity to know, hey, like these are the things that I can do. I don't have to sit with this by myself. I can reach out, I can ask questions. There's resources in place that I can reach out to, because at the end of the day, we cannot make people do anything. People will make a decision to do what they will in those moments. All we can do sometimes is just provide the resources, and then we just pray and hope that they will be able to walk through those doors. We open the door, and it's up to them to walk through it. And so that's my world, right? As a counselor and as a therapist, is that I cannot make a client do anything. I can share things and explain things and counsel them on what they can do to help themselves. But if they don't take action, if they don't do those things, then they will see little fruit.
I'm glad you say that because I think sometimes in the past, in the last few years, we get thrown out these words like, "Oh, if you have you're experiencing mental health symptoms, you should go see a counselor." But they make it sound magical, and like it's not. It's not going to be fixed in one session, and sometimes it just depends how severe your symptoms are. It can take a few sessions. It could take a few years. So I think it's just having a healthy, realistic expectation that it comes down to you too. Like the only person that's going to change everything is you. Like, yes, you can have the counselor or therapist help you, but at the end of the day, it comes down to you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the individual, and this is the thing too. Um, every individual is so different. So when it comes to them, people getting help, we cannot we cannot just create a plan for one person and expect that that same plan will work for the next person. Mental health issues look so different from person to person. One person struggling with diagnosed with general anxiety disorder, and another person diagnosed with the same disorder, they will look a little bit different, and sometimes the treatment will look different and nuanced in that way. Some people, and this, some people have legitimate physiological issues, with the brain when it comes to anxiety or depression. So some people are recommended to take medication, psychotropic medication. And I know that in a culture like ours today, sometimes we demonize medication. We either say it's not good, or it's too much. You know what I mean? It's like we rely too much on it or we don't rely enough on it. I think we need to have a healthy balance around medication as well, to know that we don't demonize it, because it can be a helpful tool, but it's not the only tool. And I would say this: counseling is not the only tool as well. Counseling is a helpful tool, but when change comes, I think that it requires a lot more than just counseling. It's a lifestyle change. It's the people that you put in your life. Think about people struggling with drug and alcohol addiction. They can get counseling and try to work through their addiction. But if they continue to hang out with people that struggle with the same addiction and they're using with them, they're not going to get any better. So there has to be legitimate lifestyle changes that happen on top of getting all these, because these tools won't matter at the end of the day if you are not taking the right steps towards really utilizing those tools to help you.
When it comes to CDI College, I love their
Yes.
initiatives they're doing right now. I love the fact that they're doing this podcast. They're also doing a social media campaign right now where everybody shares their own personal health story. For me, they got me to share my personal mental health story. So, how important do you think it is to have campaigns like this on social media saying, hey, share your story with us? It's okay.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think what CDI College is doing with this campaign is amazing. I would wish that all colleges would do this and be able to have these types of campaigns, because it is not only creating awareness, but it's giving people a voice. I think that sometimes we live in a culture where voices are basically drowned out, because of what media or society is trying to push out there. But I think for people, when they are able to share their stories, they're basically sharing a part of their life, and they're opening up a glimpse, essentially, of what they're dealing with other people. And there's something about letting go of this burden that you carry, and so you're unloading a burden that you're carrying, and what you are doing is that other people are helping you carry that. So when you share your story on social media, what that can do is that the people that are listening are not only understanding where you're coming from, but they're also carrying that weight with you, and so you don't feel like you're carrying it alone. So I think this is a beautiful thing that CDI College is doing. I think these campaigns not only once again create awareness, but I think it really gives people an opportunity to share their voice, and to really normalize this, because this is something that human beings deal with. And we need to really understand that this is not something that's completely abnormal or completely weird, something that people cannot talk about, but that people begin to see like, oh man, I never thought that so and so would deal with this, or and once again with our athletes, right, in the Olympics, or even sports figures or leaders or actors or actresses, we begin to see that people are dealing with these things, and it's a real thing, and it's impacting everyone, meaning that everyone um, has kind of a shared experience or story around what other people are dealing with. And so I think the campaign that CDI College, of giving people a voice, being able to share what their struggles are, not only creates awareness but also unloads some of that burden.
All about positivity, which brings me to my last and final question. How would a world without stigma around mental health look?
Yeah, this is a great question because I think in a lot of ways, I really believe that a world where there is no stigma around mental health would be a world where people are just more honest about themselves. I think right now we live in a culture where people like to hide things. Everyone likes to wear masks. And I think taking away the stigma of mental health will give people an opportunity to be very genuine and honest with where they're at without fearing the repercussions of that. Because our society has, over time, put this fear that if you are not this type of person, then you are not successful or that you don't have it all together. And I really believe that taking the stigma away from mental health will create an opportunity and channels for people to just be very honest without fearing the repercussion of being found out or being looked a certain way. And so that would be a beautiful thing. And obviously, our world is not perfect, but I know that we continue to strive uh, to change things, policies, whether it's policies or whether it's the way that we live our lives and how we treat others, to try to make this world a better place to live. And I think in a lot of ways, the stigma that is attached to mental health, um, when that gets erased, I think it will be a beautiful thing for humanity as a whole.
I can't wait for that day. It's super important. I'm glad that we're having this discussion. So thank you so much for joining me today on the Pick Me Up podcast. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jennifer. It was an honor and privilege to be on this, and thank you so much.
Thank you. And if you want to help people cope with mental health, of course, CDI has great programs and they've got this addictions and community service worker program. And all you have to do is go to their website for more information, which is cdicollege.ca. And we'll talk to you next month. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Pick Me Up Podcast Unscripted. Brought to you by CDI College, the training you need for the career you want. Make sure to continue the conversation by following us on our social media pages. Also subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss any episodes. And for more information about CDI College, check out our website cdicollege.ca. Talk to you next time.